Children's and Household Tales. Collected by the Brothers Grimm. The Three Little Men in the Forest. This video is not intended to present an atmospheric narrative. Rather, it is created for those who seek to read the original stories as they were published in 1812, faithfully translated from German. An interpretation is provided at the end for deeper insight. A man's wife had passed away, and he was uncertain whether he should marry again. At last, he pulled off one of his boots, which had a hole in the sole, and said to his daughter, his only child, "Take this boot, carry it up to the attic, and hang it on the big nail. Then fetch some water and pour it into the boot. If it holds the water, I'll take another wife. But if it leaks, I'll leave it be." The girl did as she was told, and the water made the whole contract so that the boot filled right to the top. The man checked for himself to be sure, then said, "Well, then I suppose I must take a wife." He went off and wooed a widow. She brought a daughter of her own into the house from her first marriage. When she saw that her stepdaughter was beautiful and liked by everyone, while her own daughter was ugly, she grew envious, pushed the stepdaughter aside in all things, and thought only about how she could make her suffer. One day, in the middle of winter when the snow lay deep, she sewed a dress out of fine paper. When it was finished, she called her stepdaughter and said, "I have a craving for strawberries. Put on this dress, go out into the forest, and bring me back a full basket. And don't come home until it's full." The girl wept bitterly and said, "In winter there are no strawberries in the forest, and even if there were, they'd be covered by snow. How could I possibly find them? And it's so cold outside that your breath freezes in the air. How can I go out in a paper dress? The wind will blow straight through it, and the thorns will tear it to shreds." "Not another word," said the stepmother. "Out you go, and don't come back without strawberries." In her jealous heart, she thought, the girl will freeze to death out there and never return. This is why she had made the thin paper dress. The girl, though, was obedient. She put on the paper dress and went out into the forest. But there was nothing but snow, and not a single green blade of grass to be seen. She walked on, and when she came to the middle of the forest, she saw a small house, and three little men peeking out from inside. She greeted them politely, and because she was so kind and well-mannered, they asked what she was doing out in the woods in such a light dress during winter. "Oh," she said, "I've been sent to gather a basket of strawberries, and I may not return home until I bring them with me." The three little men said, "Go behind our house and clear away the snow. The strawberries have been sheltered there and have grown. You'll find plenty." The girl thanked them and did as they had said. While she was clearing the snow and picking the berries, the three men said among themselves, "What shall we give her in return for her kindness and beauty?" The first said, "I give her the gift that she shall grow even more beautiful." The second said, "I give her the gift that golden coins shall fall from her mouth whenever she speaks." The third said, "I give her the gift that a king shall come and marry her." When the girl came back to them, they gave her these blessings. And as she tried to thank them, coins already began to fall from her lips. She returned home, and the stepmother was amazed by the strawberries, but even more so when she saw the golden coins falling from the girl's mouth. It wasn't long before a king arrived, took the girl with him, and made her his queen. But the stepmother now thought, "I want the same good fortune for my daughter." So she sewed her a splendid fur coat and told her to go into the forest and ask the little men for a gift. The little men, however, saw that her heart was wicked, and instead of giving her good gifts, they gave her bad ones. The first said, "I give her the gift that she shall freeze in her fur coat as if it were made of paper." The second said, "I give her the gift that she shall grow uglier each day." The third said, "I give her the gift that she shall die an unfortunate death." Shivering with cold, she returned home and told her mother what had happened. And when the mother saw that the three men's curses were already coming true, she began to think only of revenge. She went to her stepdaughter, the queen, and pretended to be kind and affectionate. She was welcomed warmly and given her own quarters in the palace. Soon afterward, the queen gave birth to a prince. One night, while she was alone, weak and recovering, the wicked woman and her daughter lifted her from the bed and carried her to the river, where they threw her in. The next morning, they told the king that the queen had died during the night. But that same night, the kitchen boy saw a duck swim in through the drain into the palace kitchen. The duck asked, "How are my guests?" He replied, "They are sleeping soundly." "How is my child?" "He sleeps peacefully in the cradle." Then she went up in the form of the queen, gave the child milk, cared for him, made his bed, and swam back out again in the form of a duck. She came again the next night, and on the third night she said to the kitchen boy, "Go to the king and tell him to swing his sword 3 times over the threshold where I entered." The boy ran and told the king, and when the king did as instructed, swinging his sword 3 times over the threshold, the queen stood before him once more, alive. The stepmother's lies and her daughter's wickedness were revealed. They were taken into the forest and left to be devoured by wild animals. A possible interpretation considering the time period. The Three Little Men in the Forest is a story that blends cruelty, magic, and poetic justice. Like many Grimm tales, it reflects the values and tensions of early 19th century society, particularly around gender roles, beauty, obedience, and the perceived consequences of virtue versus malice. Obedience and silent endurance. The stepdaughter is given an impossible task, to find strawberries in the dead of winter while wearing a paper dress. Her acceptance of this order, despite its absurdity and cruelty, reflects the ideal of female obedience promoted at the time. Her quiet suffering is rewarded, not because she fights back, but because she endures without complaint. This reflects the 19th century belief that a woman's virtue lies in humility, patience, and submission. Kindness as social currency. When the girl encounters the Three Little Men, it is not strength or cleverness that saves her, it is politeness and a soft-spoken, helpful nature. She receives supernatural rewards not for anything heroic, but for being modest, kind, and beautiful. This again reflects the period's idealization of feminine gentleness and grace as the highest virtues. Beauty and speech as power. The gifts she receives, greater beauty, gold falling from her mouth, and marriage to a king, link external appearance and material gain to moral goodness. In contrast, the stepsister receives curses that mirror her supposed inner nature, coldness, ugliness, and misfortune. This illustrates a harsh moral logic common in fairy tales. Physical traits and fate reflect inner character. Jealousy, class mobility, and vengeance. The stepmother's envy stems partly from class. The beautiful, kind daughter rises to royalty, while her own child remains unwanted. In a time when marriage was a primary means of social advancement for women, the tale reinforces the idea that only the morally pure deserve upward mobility. The stepmother's deceit, when she replaces the queen and casts her into the river, dramatizes the threat of usurping feminine virtue through manipulation, a theme often tied to fears of stepmothers and deceitful women in folklore. Symbolism of the duck and the sword. The queen's transformation into a duck and return through the kitchen drain is both magical and symbolic. Water becomes a symbol of rebirth, and the kitchen, a domestic space, becomes a portal to justice. The sword, swung 3 times, is not used to destroy but to restore truth. This underlines the idea that justice may be delayed, but it is ultimately served, often by supernatural intervention rather than institutional power. Conclusion. This tale expresses a worldview where virtue, obedience, and kindness are magically and socially rewarded, while envy, deceit, and selfishness lead to ruin. Though the moral framework may seem rigid and idealized, it reflects the values of its time, especially for women, whose worth was often measured by beauty, gentleness, and suffering endured in silence. The story is not just about strawberries and snow, it is about the cost of envy, the power of quiet goodness, and the belief that justice, though delayed, will come in full. What do you think? Was this just a bedtime story, or does it hide a deeper meaning? Do you have your own interpretation? Share your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to hear them. If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing for more stories and discussions. And if you have any constructive feedback, let me know, I'm always looking to improve.